good evening, and thank you for coming to the event today. We are here for the launch event of Teaching for Success. Do people here have a mobile phone? Can I please request everyone to put their phone on the silent mode? If you must use your phone, then please use it to tweet about the event. You can do that using the hashtag given here. Okay, a couple of seconds for everyone to put the phone on the silent mode. You can also use this hashtag to send in your comments and questions. We'll tell you about that a little later. We'll now begin. I'd like to now invite Jill Caldecott, who's Acting Director, British Council, India, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a great pleasure to welcome you to the British Council. Some of you will be very familiar with us, and maybe for some of you it will be the first time that you've visited us in our newly refurbished building. So, welcome, and especially I'm very pleased that you've come tonight for the launch of Teaching for Success. I'm going to say a little bit about the British Council and how this work fits in with our global strategic objectives. You may be aware that we work all around the world in around 110 countries, and that we've been in India for more than 50 years. And why are we here? Why are we in those countries around the world? Well, it's because we're there to strengthen the relationship between our two countries, and particularly the relationship between the peoples of those countries. So we aim to create a friendly knowledge of each other's cultures and an understanding between our peoples. And we do this in all the areas in which we work. So working through the arts, working through English language, working through qualifications, and working through education and society. All of these areas build those relationships which we hope will strengthen over time. So this evening we are celebrating the launch of our new approach to teacher education and development. It's called Teaching for Success, and it cuts across both our English work and our education work. Teacher education and development forms a really core part of our work. It's at the heart of what we do in so many countries around the world. And our vision is for a more widespread and better quality of teaching, of training, of learning, and of assessment worldwide. And we know that if you look at sorts of research that's been done, that there are plenty of indications that there is a positive link between focusing on these areas and later life success. So better academic, better career opportunities for young people and for young professionals, for teachers themselves, social empowerment, social mobility, security and stability, and a greater role for educators in the communities in which they work. I know a number of you have worked with us over time, and we are always delighted to see you and to work with you as our partners. Partners are very important to us in all of our areas of work, and I think none more so than in this area. We couldn't do our work without you. So we're very proud to help jointly with you to realise this vision. And we're very proud of the contribution that we will continue to make towards the realisation of the 4th Sustainable Development Goal, which aims to ensure inclusive, equitable, quality education and to promote lifelong learning for all. Well, we've got a fantastic evening lined up. I'm looking forward to it very much myself. We're going to begin with a presentation from our Global Head of English in Education Systems, Alison Barrett, who I will invite to come to the stage very soon. Following that, we've got thought-provoking conversations between two key commentators in the field of teacher development. And we're very pleased to have with us tonight David Weston from the Teacher Development Trust in the UK, and Subir Shukla, the principal coordinator of IGNIS ERG. Have I pronounced that correctly? Great. So I hope you'll all enjoy this evening, and I look forward to meeting you, very many of you, in the reception afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill. I'd like to now invite Alison Barrett to make the presentation on Teaching for Success. Alison is Head of English for Education Systems for British Council globally and is currently based in the New Delhi office. She has nearly 20 years' experience in working in English language teaching and teacher education and development in India and South Asia. In 2015, Alison was awarded an MBE in the Queen's New Year Honours List for services to the teaching and learning of English in India. Alison.
Let me just do the technology the long way round. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the British Council. I'm glad that you could be with us this evening. As you know, my name is Alison Barrett. I'm going to speak for about 15 minutes this evening and just introduce our new Teaching for Success approach. You'll see there the vision for Teaching for Success. And across all of our work in English, in education, in schools, our focus is improving the learning outcomes for young people and hoping that through them achieving more at school, they're able to achieve their aspirations after school and beyond and through their life. I'm going to talk, first of all, just about some of our work across India, and then I'll talk a little bit about what CPD and Teaching for Success means to us in the British Council. So over the last decade, we've worked across the country with a number of states. You'll see the spread across the map there. And we've worked with around 9,000 teacher educators and master trainers in that time. And they, in turn, have worked with around 900,000 teachers. So we've worked with teachers from primary systems, from secondary, from vocational. We've worked bringing schools together and building school links between the UK and with India. And we've supported the development of English, but also the understanding of global citizenship and now focusing on building core skills and an understanding of core skills, and I'll come back to that more in a moment. Just a couple of projects I'll share with you just to give you a sense of what we do. So our project in Bihar has been running for almost 4 years, nearly 5 years now. It's a partnership project between the British Council, the Department for International Development, and the RMSA, the Rajyamik Shiksha Abhiyan in Bihar. And it aims to support their ambitions to build the quality of teaching and learning of English across the state. So since we started 4 or 5 years ago, we've worked with around 200 teacher educators in Bihar, and they in turn are working with about 3,200 secondary school teachers. And you can see there the impact that we've made on that community of teachers through working with them to improve their language skills, but also their methodology skills in the classroom. We're currently working as well in Madhya Pradesh on our project called Empower. And here we're working with similar numbers of teacher educators, but you can see they're working with around 7,000 primary school teachers this time. And again, so far that project I think is in year 2. Rustam's nodding at me. And through that project, we're also focusing on language proficiency and awareness of CPD and professional development skills and methodology. So you can read all the reports there later if you want to know a bit more. But why is it that we're here? Why are we here? What is professional development? Well, I'm sure many of you have an answer to that. I'm going to try and answer it cleverly in the words of another wise man. Do these words ring any bells for anyone? Anyone know who said these? Shakespeare, yes. And do you know why Shakespeare is so important at the moment? Yeah, I can hear some giggles. So Shakespeare, it was 400 years ago on Sunday that he passed away, and the British Council in the UK has been celebrating his life and his legacy. And obviously the English language is one of the huge legacies that we have from the work of Shakespeare. But I think this quote really helps us understand what we mean by professional development. It's not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves. If you've been to events here before, you would have seen Rod Belaitho or Amol Padwad talk at length about CPD and about how development is not something that can be done to somebody else. It starts from within, and it's something that we have to be motivated and really interested in doing to improve and to learn and to grow. It's really not something that someone else can do. As we're all teachers here, or we've all worked with teachers, and when we walk into our classrooms, it's up to us what we do. And so we have to have the motivation, the awareness, the knowledge, the understanding to make a change in our practice when that classroom door is closed. I think this poster, which was designed by Professor Kirti Kapoor from the National Council for Educational Research and Training. I don't know if she's here, but I'm sure she's watching if she's not here. And this shows us the importance of how professional development is a journey. It's not just one event, it's a lifelong journey. And you can see here the teachers are walking along the pathway with each other, holding hands, helping each other, collaborating and discussing as they go. And that's one of the other aspects of professional development. The definition that we work to is here, and this is a definition that was developed by a group of Indian academics, teachers, policymakers through our CPD think tank initiative that finished in 2012. It was a 3-year process, and here you can see that the think tank group defined professional development here with 2 Ps. So we almost changed it to CPPD as a result of this activity, but really trying to emphasize the importance of the personal dimension and the personal fulfillment and satisfaction that comes about as a result of improving our own professional practice. There's a focus on knowledge, on skills, and on practice. You can't have any of those without the other. As a teacher, you have to have an understanding of the theory in order to be able to enact it in the classroom. We all know that. But there's also a focus here on empowerment and agency and the importance of ensuring that as an individual teacher, we're not just thinking about ourselves and developing ourselves, but we're doing it for the benefit of our institutions and for the children that we're working with. And we wanted to reflect that in our definition here. But it's not just about the teachers. It's very easy for us to say, oh, it's you, it's up to you, you've got to make the difference, to put all the blame or all the responsibility on the teachers. Whereas actually the teachers need the support from the system, they need the support from the institution, from the environment, from their principals, in order to bring about and sustain that change. They can't do it on their own. And it's very easy for us sometimes to stand and point fingers and expect it to be, to lay that responsibility at the feet of the teachers. And we have to think much more broadly than that. What do we know about how teachers learn? I'm not going to say too much about this because I'm sure that David and Subir are going to tell us a lot about their understanding of the literature, but also their own experience of what they know helps teachers learn. This was a study done by Catherine Walter, who's the chair of the British Council's English Language Advisory Group, and she did a study of 35 studies in the English language space and pulled out 8 key aspects that she found were prevalent in all of the successful studies that she looked at. And you can see here that there is responsibility here of the teachers collaborating and working with each other, but there's also, it's important for there to be external input, for there to be support from principals and leadership, and also from mentors and coaches. So the responsibility, again, is much broader than the individual teacher. So teaching for success is responding to what we know from what we've experienced, from our experience not only in India but our experience globally. In 2014, we worked with 57 governments globally on English language development programs, some of them small, some of them much bigger than the ones that you saw here today. And our aim is to ensure that we are sharing that experience and that knowledge across our networks and helping our partners and working with them to bring about transformational change in the way that English is taught or the way that other languages, other subjects are taught using latest understanding of pedagogical practices, what works in terms of pedagogy. So our focus is on providing some structure and a framework that enables this transformational change to take place. And we've developed a CPD framework, one for teachers and another CPD framework for teacher educators. We're not aiming to prescribe particular approaches. We're aiming for a framework that provides the flexibility and the freedom for teachers and educators to identify their needs, to plot their own development journey and pathway, and for institutions and governments to support them on that journey by putting the right incentives, rewards and structures in place to do that. So we have developed the framework based around 12 professional practices, and these are practices that evolved through research that we did with stakeholders across South Asia, but in other countries as well, through research that we did looking at other frameworks from other organisations and bodies. And we identified these as the 12 most important for teachers in the 21st century. You'll see on the diagram on the right-hand side, we call it different things internally. Some of us call it the Pac-Man, going and trying to eat up teachers. I'm not sure if that's the right image we want to portray. Some of us call it the fan. Some of us call it the up sort of sideways peacock with the tail kind of going round. But the diagram there really just shows that for every professional practice, a teacher may be at they may be expert, or they may be at the beginning of their expertise for different aspects, and that it's impossible to map that competence onto the number of years a teacher's been teaching, or where they might be teaching, their age, their gender, etc., etc. And I'll show you a bit more how that works in a moment. So the framework moves through 4 stages of development. So you've got 4 colours here, light yellow going up to red. And the light yellow is about awareness. So it's recognising that before a teacher is able to learn about a particular practice, they first need to be aware it exists. They need to understand what it is, and they need to understand the importance of that particular professional practice for their context. And some may be more important than others, obviously, depending on where you work and what the needs of your students are. Once you've moved through that awareness and understanding, then it's about transferring that to your practice. And the second 2, engagement and integration, are more about demonstrating that you have understood and you are able to use that competency, that knowledge in the classroom with your students. So moving from a basic level of competency to a more expert level. For the teacher-educator framework, it's a more complex framework. So here we've got 10 professional practices, 6 enabling skills, and 4 self-awareness features. And this is recognising that the role of the teacher-educator is often more complex. You first have to be a competent teacher. You have to be able to understand the system within which you work. You have to be able to role model the skills and behaviours that you would expect teachers to demonstrate in the classroom or in their schools. And you often have to negotiate and mediate with the education system to enable the teachers to get access to the professional development opportunities that they need. So you need that upward management as well, and the skills to be able to operate within a system. And here you've got the stages of development are slightly different, moving from foundation to specialisation, recognising that when you move to the role of a teacher-educator, you may specialise in digital literacy or teaching of young learners, or maybe something around multilingual approaches, for example. And these are just the professional practices here. You have all this in your pack, so I'm not going to go through it in too much detail. So how does it work then? So you've got the framework, you've got the professional practices. So if you're a teacher and you're looking at this, how's it going to help you? So the aim is that you would use the descriptors for the professional practices, and a teacher would be encouraged through working with a mentor or on their own if they feel confident to map their particular skills on this particular framework. So they would end up with some kind of profile like this. So in this particular case, this teacher has identified themselves as near the integration level, at the engagement level for the professional practice about taking responsibility, understanding the policies and practices in their country, but they have rated themselves as awareness level in the aspect of developing 21st century skills or core skills. So this way, the teacher can see what aspects they might need to focus on when they're mapping out their development journey and what aspects are maybe not as important. And for a teacher-educator, they can look at the results from a group or a cohort of teachers and identify where there might be commonalities or strengths or areas for development within their group. And for a geographical area too, you can come up with a report that indicates what the potential needs are for a group of teachers in one specific area. So it's enabling a teacher to plot their own journey, but it's also potentially enabling a school or a larger geographical area to think about what kind of support they need to give the teachers in that area, rather than just coming up with one course that fits everybody's needs or tries to fit everybody's needs. It's a jagged profile, what we call a jagged profile. So you might have, for example, you might be a primary school teacher who's been teaching a whole range of skills for many years. You feel very confident, you understand your professional practices in many of the pedagogical areas, but then suddenly the government introduces English from grade 1 and you're suddenly asked to teach English. So your professional practices for the teaching of English might go right down to the awareness level. So we can't map the competency onto career stage or age, for example, as I said earlier. It's a self-assessment. It's only giving us an indication of needs, and it's a starting point for a conversation and a negotiation to help you plot your journey moving forwards. The kind of support that we provide for teachers, and these are resources that have been developed specifically in India, and these resources are mapped to the professional development framework. So the idea is that a teacher can then seek out these resources and identify aspects that they can then study on their own through self-study or through attending specific webinars or conferences, etc. So here you can see a range of resources we've developed. So you have the Bihar workbooks here on the left, which are now available on our websites. You have teacher development films, so you have films of teachers teaching in their classrooms across the country. Teacher training clips for mobile phones, so that's in Maharashtra, and we have Marathi versions of that. And we have resources that are also mapped to the national curriculum framework for teachers to use with their students in the classroom. So these are some of the support supplementary resources that we can provide for teachers to use on their own. I should also say here that we're also in the process of mapping resources from other organisations to the framework, so that we can also help other organisations' resources, help them get discovered by teachers who are trying to find the best materials out there for them to meet their needs. We have support for teacher educators and teachers as well. So we do that through a range of collaborative activities, co-planning. We use WhatsApp in many states. My colleague John is here somewhere, I think. He's initiated a WhatsApp project in Maharashtra that we've just done an initial evaluation, and the findings are quite positive there of the use of WhatsApp as a collaboration tool for teachers and also the administrators. And we've also done some research into what teachers want to use technology for in terms of enabling their professional development. And finally, we're also looking at the support that we can provide for principals and administrators. So we have a very robust school leadership programme that our schools team run across the country. Again, they've been piloting in Maharashtra over the last year or so. But we also have a range of research that we have helped inform courses to support the people who manage the provision for the teachers and the educators. So managing change in ELT. And here you can see the Justice Verma Commission report in India that highlights the importance of the involvement of all the stakeholders in that change process. It's not just the academics, but it's also the administrators that support them, that need to understand what the desired change is that you're trying to bring about and see how their role can support it. And they also need professional development. It's not just for teachers, obviously. So the development pathway is also online. We have our website, the Teaching English website, has been mapped to the framework. So a teacher who's looking at our website can go into the website, they can do a self-assessment online, and then they can find their way through all that content to study if they want to do it themselves and they can't necessarily afford to attend a course or a training program. This is a research piece on our core skills. So we have the professional practice of developing 21st century skills, looks at the importance of communication, collaboration, creativity. You'll see them all there, 5 C's and an S on the right-hand side. So you can read the research that's underpinning the importance of these 6 core skills. You can think about the theory underpinning it, but then you can also go into the website and find practical activities and resources and videos that help you see how you can bring that to life in your classroom. So I think I'll finish there by just confirming or sort of summarising what the Teaching for Success approach is. So it's really a way of us bringing together a wide range of initiatives and resources and materials and ideas and people, more importantly, together to help support teachers in their professional development journeys. The CPD frameworks are at the heart of what we do. They help us organise and plan and structure what we do, but they also give the freedom and flexibility for a teacher to find their own way. They help us support the development of systems within an institution or within a wider geographical area. And they're also, all of our resources and materials have very strong references to issues around equality, diversity and inclusion, which are really important to us at the British Council as one of our core values. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm really looking forward to hearing from David and from Subir about what they've done in their experience that has helped in some of those challenges around motivating and incentivising teachers and helping them get on that development journey and stay on that journey so that they can achieve the best for their learners. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alison. Can I please request you to come back on the stage? And I'd like to invite some more people to join Alison on the stage. Jill. Sandeepa Sahai, Assistant Director, Programs and Operations for English Partnership, and Amy Lightfoot, Assistant Director, Academic Quality Assurance, English Partnerships. It's like a women power moment. Thank you, ladies. And glad to see that we have some more people joining us in the audience. I think they've beaten the odd-even odds, and it's a Monday, it's an evening, it's too hot. So thank you all for joining us. We'll now move on to the panel discussion. And in the interest of gender equality, our panel members are now male. So can I please invite Mr. David Weston and Mr. Subir Shukla to come up on the stage. David Weston is the founder and chief executive of the Teacher Development Trust, the United Kingdom's national non-profit organization for effective professional development in schools and colleges. He founded the trust in 2012 after spending 9 years as a secondary school maths and physics teacher, experiencing a growing frustration with the provision for teacher development around the school system. Since its launch, David has steered the trust to be one of the foremost voices in education on the subject of professional development. We also have Subir Shukla, who is the principal coordinator of IGNIS ERG, a group of professional resource persons supporting teachers and enhancing the quality of education, particularly in government schools, to address the needs of marginalized children. Subir has previously worked as a teacher in tribal villages in Madhya Pradesh, as an editor at the National Centre for Children's Literature, National Book Trust, India, Chief Consultant Quality Improvement and Textbook Development, District Primary Education Program MHRD, and as the Educational Quality Advisor for SSA MHRD, facilitating the development of the quality framework for the right to education. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you. It's working. Can you hear me? All right. Great. So, David, welcome. We are very happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here as well. Can you hear me okay? Yes, good. We did want to remind you, have a look at these little blue pieces of paper. We'd love to hear from you today. So we either have, for those of you who are Twitter fans, you can tweet comments or questions to us using the hashtag, or alternatively you can SMS your comments as well. And through the power of technology, we're hoping we'll be able to beam these to you. So please don't transmit too many jokes, or else we won't be able to concentrate. So.
All right, perhaps we can start with something which has always intrigued me a lot. Why exactly should a teacher want to develop himself or herself? If you're a teacher and you're teaching quite well, you're a good teacher. You don't really need to develop a lot. And if you happen to be somebody who doesn't enjoy your job, you've given up, you've kept facing a whole lot of onslaught of various kinds of inputs, and you've decided it doesn't help you very much, then too you really wouldn't want to develop yourself. So one sort of starting issue for us really is, what do we do so that so that there is some sort of engagement, involvement on the teacher's part?
And we were having a conversation before, and we were talking about the fact that in public many people talk about teacher motivation as though it's a terrible thing. Teachers are not motivated, they're not working hard enough, we must make them. And yet actually when we look at the research, and there's been a lot of research in how we get teachers to develop, we know that as with children, we can't get children to learn unless they feel connected, unless they really feel this matches their aspirations, they feel the relevance to what they're doing, and we see the same issue with teachers. In the UK right now, we were exploring earlier the fact that government initiatives tend to say, we know what's best for you as a group of teachers, and so we're going to tell you, you need to develop in these ways. And of course we then see that the teachers themselves, they don't feel that's particularly relevant to them. So what is it we do to overcome this?
Yeah, in fact, in India we do in-service training programs for some 2.5 million teachers every year. These are designed by experts. Teachers are carted in, oriented, and sent back. And how much of it actually gets, translated into reality is a very big issue. So I've always found that unless you are able to generate some degree of ownership within teachers, and that can really happen if we listen to teachers. And one of the problems with many of our training programs is that they don't start by listening to teachers at all. So teachers might have a whole set of issues. How do I deal with the diverse range of students who do not attend school every day? How do I deal with the fact that I have to teach more than one class at one time? But the actual training program that they would get would involve something quite different. How does it work out for you?
Well, exactly that. So we see the government will typically say, we want to change the curriculum. We believe that the curriculum change will be good for the country. It will be very visible. Politicians like visible changes. And again, when that's manifests in professional development, then we see teachers saying, but the problem I have right now, I have 3 students I'm really worried about. Now, the approach that we as an organisation are trying to take is to say, start in the schools and ask teachers, first of all, to say, what issues am I facing in my classroom now? Which students am I worried about? Which elements of the curriculum do I feel I could teach better? And now I'm going to work with colleagues over time and I'm going to solve these problems. I'll listen to the input you want to give me, but I will then attach its relevance to the problems I face. But that's easy to say, but that's very difficult to do, because as soon as you have control over a system, you want to impose your solutions.
Don't we know it a lot in India? We have a command and control kind of structure. Our system is so structured in terms of hierarchies. Everybody loves to give instructions to teachers. Everybody wants to tell teachers what to do, when to teach, what to teach, exactly how to teach, and so on. But in reality, as David is pointing out, change happens only if you create spaces for teachers to think for themselves. So only by giving up its power does a system become really powerful in terms of enabling teachers to do what it is asking them to do. In fact, this is a question for the audience, and I hope during the discussion time that follows, some of you will comment on this. How do we reconcile the existing command and control structure with the needs of genuine teacher professional development, which require that we decentralize? We'll trust teachers, we hand things over to them. That really is a very big issue for us.
Now, in our conversation before, I was actually saying that from a UK perspective, I hugely envy the position that India is in, for almost the reason that you feel there is a problem, in that you have these hierarchical structures which span a small area and a larger area and at a state level and national level. In the UK, this mantra that all schools must have autonomy, that everyone, it's devolved to the school level, has been taken so far that now if you want to change anything in the UK, you must contact every single school individually. So actually, I'm hugely envious of the fact that somebody at the top can have a conversation with 14 people who can have a conversation with 100 people and so on, although obviously there are problems with that as well.
Yeah. Actually, true, having a system allows us to do large-scale work. It's very common for us to organize training programs for 300,000 teachers, and it can be done within a few months' time. But what happens in all this is that one of the issues we often forget is what are the outcomes that you really expect? For instance, if I want children to learn reading, I have to enable teachers to learn how to teach reading. But then I have to enable their trainers, the school heads, their supervisors, cluster and block resource center coordinators, and district officials also to be able to support them in doing that. And then I have to enable the state level system to actually create the kind of capacity building processes which enable the district and the sub-district level to do it. Very often in our teacher professional development processes, what happens is that we focus on the teachers and children, but the rest of the system gets left out. You know, a school is merely a manifestation of a system. It can't be very different from that. So irrespective of our training, we have repeatedly been talking about children learning through activities, but because our system functions with teachers only by giving them instructions, that is what teachers end up doing, because that is the model that everybody manifests.
So I think there is a problem, isn't there, with scale, that we have an issue where something might start as a very good idea, right at the very top, and every time it's passed down or cascaded, then people make it their own, to the extent that by the time you reach the classroom, it's actually so far from what it was, it's distorted. Now, I know you've done work previously around this area and actually trying to get that balance right. So how do you feel that you can scale something up so that you don't destroy ownership, but you also don't destroy the fidelity of the idea of the original important ingredients?
Well, a few things that helped us a lot in India, especially between 1997 to 2007. One was the creation of, for several years we struggled with this issue of cascade. How do you make the cascade work? And the model that worked best was what for want of a better word, I will call reconstructible training program. The training was designed to be like a kit. It could be assembled at every site differently. For example, if you had 24 sessions in a training, trainers would get materials for 40 sessions, but they would have to choose and decide which ones they would do. So there would be a great deal of ownership, there would be localization, and this was evaluated by the NCERT and was found to really work in about 8 or 9 states of India. This was implemented quite rigorously, and it really made a huge difference. There was huge intake in terms of classroom change processes. But this led us to a very different sort of problem altogether, which was that whenever teachers started to get empowered, and maybe I'm going away from this issue, and you might also like to comment on this, we discovered that nobody loves an empowered teacher. Because empowered teachers, they start doing things in their class and they don't want to take nonsense from anybody. They don't want to listen to a corrupt headmaster or an official asking them to do things they're not supposed to do, because they're actually teaching and succeeding in the class. We found that teachers really change when children say, "Sir, we enjoyed what you were doing." They discovered that they were able to make things happen in the class, and then they started becoming very different altogether. This led to huge conflicts across the states. There's a long history to it. So I keep coming back to this issue that when a system is designed to command and control, giving up that power vis-a-vis the teachers, and then expecting teachers to give up that power vis-a-vis children, that becomes a very big issue in teacher professional development, because when they really develop and see themselves as professionals, then there are many who are not happy to see them as that.
Yes, I agree, and actually, so that links, the technology is working magically here. So there was a question, don't we need an enabling ecosystem before teachers care about what happens in the classroom? And this really brings us onto this idea of it's all very well to empower teachers, but that requires a change of culture and it requires a change of leadership. A lot of the work that we're doing now in the UK, I've been leading a government group to create a new standard for professional development. And typically speaking, people will think of professional development as the input. But actually, we're saying, no, that's only part of it. And actually, effective teacher development requires a relationship between what the teachers do, between the workplace, the school, the leadership, the environment that's created, and also that expert input. If you only have the expert input, but teachers don't engage, that schools don't have the right culture, they're not enabled, then you don't get learning. If you get a wonderful learning environment, but there's no great input, then teachers don't learn. So I think this comes back to this idea that actually we need leaders to see themselves differently. If we go to there was a fantastic systematic review by Professor Viviane Robinson, who looked at the qualities of leadership that lead to improved outcomes for learners. And the most impactful thing that any leader can do, whether a principal of a school or a system leader, is to lead professional learning. And that involves them talking about their own learning, that involves them saying where we make mistakes, but also listening. And we need to allow leaders to say, as I pass control to you, I will listen more to you, I will give you more agency, more autonomy, and I will be less defensive. Yeah. And I think that's a really big issue, that actually, if we put school leaders under a lot of pressure and system leaders under pressure to say, you must make things better, we need conversely to enable them to say, but you must listen. And that's very hard to do. I wonder if there are any particularly great examples of enabling leaders to do that in India.
Well, actually, we have examples at all levels. For example, there are several schools where school leaders have managed to work as a team with teachers. We now have a large national school leadership program, and I'm sure there are many success stories there. I've also seen a lot of state project directors of programs such as DPEP, SSA, and so on, who have managed to actually go out and be among teachers and mix among them in a certain way, which really is a big motivating factor as well. But I would say that they're not as common as they need to be, because giving up that control or giving up your position of power is really a very, very, very difficult thing. One of the other sort of related aspects is that you are actually going to create something which hasn't happened before. So when we conceptualize a new kind of classroom and we train teachers in doing this, it's not always that we have working models that we can show. So it's a journey into the unknown. And there is an element of uncertainty, fear, what if it works, what if it doesn't work, what if it works too well, and so on. I don't know, how has your experience been on this?
Well, so I think one of the issues where we need to create change, then we need to enable people to see what the future might look like. And for innovation, that's very difficult. I think there's a balance sometimes between saying we could do something new and better and you need to imagine it, but also we make it concrete for people as well. I think, it relates to a question which has come in, how important is it that teacher educators have recent classroom experience? Yeah. And teachers want to see someone authentic who they can relate to, who they can say, yeah, you understand what I'm coming from. I often have this debate with teachers and with school leaders and say, well, should the leader of a school, should a school principal also be a teacher? A lot of them say to me, we don't have time, we can't possibly do that. But then I say, well, if you're also an instructional leader, can you not, I mean, how can you afford not to? Because the authenticity you will give yourself, the connection you will have to the learning going on in the school, the most important thing in your school, which is the classroom learning, is invaluable. So there's something there about having that authenticity, being able to show people and people believing in you to create change so people can see what might be.
Yeah. If the school leader is also the facilitator of improvement, then of course he's sort of on the site and he understands the teacher's situation, sympathizes with it, and can actually make things happen in that context. For us, one big issue really is that those who design the teacher professional development processes sometimes are unable to actually see what is happening on the ground. What has happened in the last 20 years is that as a result of expansion of our system, we now have children who traditionally never ever attended school. Children with disabilities, working children, children from certain communities, and so on. We now have so many more languages in the classroom. In slum schools, it's common to find 11 to 17 languages because of migration. So what has happened is that earlier where we had diversity, we now have super diversity. And now, because of right to education, if the teacher to student norm is fixed at 30 students, you will find that 70 to 80% teachers are actually teaching more than one grade at one time, because the commonest school in India is about 80 to 100 children. So you give 3 teachers, so 2 teachers at least teach more than one class. The point I'm making is that the norm is multi-grade, that the norm is a shifting, diverse population which cannot attend every day. Yet, all the inputs from curriculum to textbook to teacher professional development assume that children are homogeneous, they will attend every day, and teacher will teach one class at one time. So we have a situation where our inputs tend to be designed to fail. They're not going to work, because you come in with a basketball into a cricket match. So how do we overcome this kind of systemic blindness is a very big issue for us. Even though we have so many good things in place, we have very good sense of pedagogy, of materials, we have interesting textbooks, but because we are unable to recognize some key issues, many of our efforts don't actually result. I am sure diversity and increasing diversity is an issue in the UK as well.
It is an issue. Actually, I mean, it's a general issue that when we see most CPD, and actually, I mean, from the work we've done, this is an international phenomenon. Most CPD is designed at the top and has less relevance by the time teachers get to their classroom. And actually, that's the wrong way around. In many cases, we know all the research on professional development is very, very clear that teachers must learn specifically to help students. It must be focused on students. How will I grow as a teacher to help my students grow? So therefore, the first step is not what do we want our teachers to do. The question is, what do we want our students to learn? In this classroom, in this school, what are the things we want them to learn better? What are the problems that they're not learning? And then we need to feed that process up to the design level and say, okay, based on these needs, what professional development is needed, and that should be fed down so people can see it's responsive to their needs. But again, it's easy for us to sit here and say that. It's very hard to design a very responsive system. We find when we work with school leaders, their own pressures mean, for me to survive in this job, I need all my teachers doing this right now. And this is true in any system. And actually, it's very hard to say, these may be my pressures, but actually in the long term, if I put my pressures aside, let me help you with your pressures. But again, that's very easy to say. As soon as you make school leaders feel stressed and system leaders feel stressed, they come back to control and command and control. And you've already talked about that as being a really prevalent issue here as well.
There's a question here which I think is so relevant to some of the issues we are discussing. What about follow-up to training? And, you know, I want to respond to this, if I may. And it's so crucial, it's more crucial than is imagined. At least in the case of India, what we are doing really is trying to leap over a huge cultural barrier. For 3,000 years, Indians have grown up with the idea that there is a guru, a preceptor who gives knowledge. Now, our policies are quite contrary to this. You don't give knowledge. You're supposed to enable students to construct their own knowledge, have activity-based learning. How do you make this kind of huge shift? So one of the things we have learned from our experience in the last 30 years really is that actually it's not during the workshops or face-to-face inputs alone that teachers really change. They actually change when they experience success repeatedly in the class. It seems to me that from all the experience and research that I can access, that is the only point when a teacher really changes. You know, it's not only about how a teacher learns, but it's a theory of how do teachers change, which we need to apply in our context. So teachers change when they experience success, as in children responding, learning. Now that cannot happen if a teacher works on his or her own. That happens when there's a mentor who comes in, who observes her teaching, does not demonstrate, because demonstration implies that I can do it but you can't. Instead whispers in her ear, why don't you try this out? Enables her to do things differently and succeed in getting children to respond and learn, and then says, I always knew you could do it. That is the kind of follow-up that we are really looking for. Now in India we set up a very elaborate system of cluster resource centers, block resource centers, and they were actually designed for this purpose. Unfortunately, they got hijacked into something totally different. They've ended up collecting data, which is an obsession with all governments these days. And that seems to be the main thing that they're doing. But in reality, enabling teachers to succeed, and that's a mechanism that exists, but we have not been able to operationalize it here.
So, I mean, this is such a shared problem. This is exactly the same problem. If you look at teachers across England, across the UK, it is so easy to simply deliver information. Someone here has the information, just do it, let's give you this information. Who here in the audience is a teacher? Who is here will be teaching classes? Okay, so there are a number of you. So I ask you this question. Have you ever had the situation where you've taught something in one lesson, and the next lesson or later they come back, and I don't remember ever knowing that.
Yeah.
Right? It's a familiar problem. And yet we know that's going to be true of students. We know it.
Yes.
And if you simply say, I'm going to present the information, that's it. We know they have to engage. They have to construct their own knowledge of it. They have to try it out. They have to fail. They have to succeed. And we know that. We've been trying to push that in our systems. And yet for teachers, we say, oh no, for you, you just hear it once. And actually, it's even more complicated. As teachers, we come with so many inbuilt habits. There's so much instinct. It's even harder to change. So actually, you can't just tell me, oh, by the way, it's like saying to someone who smokes, you shouldn't smoke, and assuming that will change their habits. Yeah. So I completely agree. And yet we have the same frustration. When it comes down to it, we want to tell teachers a lot. So, okay, let's give them less time to practice and more time to listen. So, I mean, this is something we really need to work together over a long period of time. It puts the continuing in continuing professional development.
So in your experience, the kind of professional development programs you've been involved with, what kind of methods or means enable teachers to learn a lot?
So, I mean, I think the research is quite clear in this, that expert input, maybe on a course, is important, but it's also very clear that by itself it has no long-term impact, certainly not on the children we teach. It has no long-term impact at all. So these inquiry approaches that we know, again, we try and encourage in schools. An approach we've been really interested in is one, actually, we look over to Japan, to their lesson study approach. And lesson study is very interesting. You get 3 teachers who work together. They plan a lesson and they focus on maybe 2 students and say, we're going to really focus on the impact we want to have on these 2 students. We plan what we want to achieve. We plan based on what we know about them. And we plan and we predict what will happen in this lesson. Then we watch that lesson together. One of us teaches, the other ones watch. We watch those 2 students and their interaction with everyone else. We talk to those students at the end of the lesson, and then we reflect. This is an inquiry approach where we are saying, let's try and have impact, let's explore it, let's reflect on it. And in Japan, that's taken to the next level by having an expert coach who sits and says, I know how this approach works, and I know the content really well, but I'm not telling you. I'm drawing you to the right conclusions and guiding you. And that seems to be inspirational, not only effective, but teachers come away. I had a teacher say to me, I've learnt more in this series of activities than I have over 15 years of teaching. Because my eyes are opened. I've started watching children and not ticking boxes. But it's very hard to find the time. Very, very hard.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the issues really is, again, this probably maybe more for India, that when you have never experienced something yourself, you've never seen it, how do you create it for others? If you've never been through activities or inquiry as an approach, how do you generate it for your children? So typically in a lot of our work, there's been a lot of experiential approaches where teachers have experienced a lot of things, activities, etc., and they have reflected on them, tried to apply them, and then worked on it. But of course, we really need to refine it much further than what has happened till now. Do you think, looking at one of the questions here, technology can make a big difference?
It's a challenge, isn't it? I mean, there are lots of people who want to tell us that technology is the future and will solve everything.
This is mainly the vendors, I must say.
Yes, it's true. They spend a lot of money telling us that they have the solutions.
Yeah.
I think for me, I probably think that technology actually has more solutions for teachers than it does for students right now. We know we need to get teachers in communities. I mean, the reason I've ended up doing the job I'm doing now is through the power of Twitter and speaking to educators globally. Mita and I we met through Twitter, and we were having conversations, and that's led to all sorts of other fascinating conversations. And so I think creating communities, but potentially also maybe video. Nothing gets a teacher as excited as watching other children learn and then saying, well, what did they do? How could I do that? But again, it's very easy to say, fine, give them all video, but it's more difficult than that, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. In fact, maybe this is a question for the audience. And what would you like technology to do to enable better teacher professional development? In terms of children's learning, we know that there's a lot of evidence that it is not helping. Because one of the things it is doing is that it is not changing the hierarchy of learning. You know, earlier the teacher was a source, the textbook was a source, now the screen is the source. So if it is not changing that, it is not making a huge difference. But in the case of teachers, it might actually work very differently. So during the discussion time that we have, we'd love to hear from you on this issue of technology and how you think it can be used.
And I think it's interesting also to explore what has worked for you. Has there been an aspect of your professional learning, your development, which has been enabled through technology? Because I think one of the things we perhaps do too much in education is say, what are the problems, what are the problems? And actually, there's so much to celebrate. And I know there will be many people in this room who have learnt through technology, and actually it's great to celebrate. We need to do more celebrating and showing that there is great practice.
Yeah.
One of the, a really interesting question is, what's the role of incentives in CPD? Do you think, can you take a teacher who doesn't really want to engage, can you incentivize them to do it?
Yeah, you know, one of the problems in incentives is that unless there's a clear path which tells you that this is the progression from here to here to here, and then you can say, I was here, but today I'm here. What is the incentive going to be around unless there can be some demonstrable progress? In India, we worked on teacher performance standards in 2007 to 2010, and they were actually implemented on some large scale called ADEPTS, Advancement of Educational Performance Through Teacher Support. Some of you might like to look at it. And there, what we found was that one of the incentives was that teacher himself or herself felt that I moved one level up. Second, there was a lot of shared community sort of discussion that what can we do together to move. Third, it was found that when states had to select resource persons or people to be sort of sent here or there and so on, they would choose people who had demonstrated higher level of performance along those lines. So that also acted as an incentive. But in the absence of such a framework of clear performance levels, let us say, it's very difficult to incentivize teacher performance or teacher professional development.
So an interesting idea, I'd love your thoughts on it, is there's an American academic, Eric Hanushek, who suggested that very simple how to improve education. You simply fire the bottom 10% of teachers who aren't improving, and then the rest will improve. And hire new ones, and they'll be at the average. And you just keep doing that every year. Do you think that's a good incentive for CPD?
There was a research study done in India with the Azim Premji Foundation and Murli Karthik, Muralidharan Karthik from US. It was a long study on paying teachers more if their students learned more. I mean, you can get the details, but broadly the outcome was that it didn't help.
Yeah.
So yes, that may or may not happen. But what I would love to see though is, we do a lot of rating of schools, or we do rating of states. For example, we have Education Development Index. We do it wrong, I believe. What we should look at is, I would rate a teacher by the performance of the bottom 25% of the students. Only. What happens is the top guys, they kind of average things out and it appears all okay. But in reality, those who really need attention and focus are not getting it. But if a better teacher was that teacher whose average, that last 25% students' average score was relatively better, I would say that is a better teacher. And that is a way for a system to communicate to teachers that this is what you really need to do. And if you focus on these students, then overall everything improves. What happens is that everybody focuses on the best and the most advantaged. And as a result, only a few develop and a few learn. And then professional development as a whole also doesn't happen, because unless you address the needs of those who are the most marginalized, you are not professionally developed.
I agree completely. And there was some wonderful research recently that suggested that, to be honest, middle-class children are pretty resistant to teaching, good or bad. Because actually, if the teacher's not great, mum and dad are going to help. They'll hire a tutor, they'll do something to help. It's the children from the disadvantaged backgrounds who are hugely, hugely sensitive to the quality of teaching. And really great teaching can get them twice, 3 times as much progress. And really bad teaching, they will fail. They don't have the resources, they don't have the habits, they haven't seen the model of how to be resilient themselves. So I completely agree. If we focus on those students that need the most, and if we help teachers focus on them, then actually we're really focusing on the best teaching. My only caveat to that, I suppose, is what that can sometimes mean is lack of stretch, and you get some of the most able children who are then quietly ignored. But actually, I think there is a balance here. I think we can get stretch and challenge, but if we really focus on those most disadvantaged children, I think that's inspiring for teachers as well. You can say, well, here's a child who needed the most and I was able to help. And if my growth can help that child and I can see it, I've made a difference for life, probably for generations. I agree. Let's make sure that focus happens. And again, that's a shared objective again.
There's a question here about what would be the priorities. And I would like to we are almost at the end. So the one thing, if I were asked, what is the one thing you would like to change? I would say listen to teachers. In Bangladesh, we conducted listening workshops where officials got teachers together and asked them, what do you do, how do you do it, what do you find difficult, and what can we do to make your life easier? And they were not allowed to say anything else. Teachers couldn't believe it, and when they first believed it, then they first let off steam, saying that you never pay attention to us. But finally, they poured their hearts out. And the officials found themselves saying, oh, we thought you were teachers, but you're human beings. And the teachers said too, we thought you're officials, but you're human beings. But the real point of the story is this. After 10 days, almost every single teacher out of those 400 teachers who participated was found to be doing something different in their classroom. They had attended numerous in-service programs, but had never done anything. But it was after this that they all started doing things. We should just listen to them.
Yes, I agree. And actually, my one thing I would like to change really would be, let's make professional learning, professional development, focus it on students. I will learn so that my students learn. And every activity, well, which student should benefit? Every session, well, what problem am I solving here? And I think if we can get teachers listened to, and if they focus on what's happening in my classroom, we get rich professional learning that inspires, that makes a genuine difference. So again, these are really shared objectives, and I think if I could wave a magic wand and make that happen, it would make the whole of education such a wonderful thing.
Well, thank you very much. I think this brings us to an end of our discussion like this. But I think the floor is now open.
Thank you, David and Subir, for sharing issues related to CPD from your respective countries. I think you've already taken some questions that came in through Twitter and SMS. We'll now take questions from the audience. Before that, can I please invite Alison to come up on the stage?
Yes, we need a chair for her.
Yes. So if you have a question, then you can ask the panel. And before you ask the question, please tell us your name and where you're from. And I'll also request you to be brief. And it'll be appreciated if it's a question and not a statement. We'll have time for discussion outside, so let's do that later. Yes, gentleman there.
My name is Rupesh. I have a question. There are many teachers who are... My name is Ritesh. So in India, we are having very high number of teachers who are remotely located. And maybe many of the times they are not becoming the integral part of these training programs. So what are the ways to involve them and to teach them also how to handle those critical points which you guys just stated?
Would you like to comment, or shall I?
Please.
All right. Yeah, actually, in the government system, what's happening is that there is an effort to reach out to all teachers, but surely that is not the case so much with aided and private schools here. And really speaking, the way out for them is to use teacher communities. There are several groups like this. For instance, in Maharashtra, there's an active teachers forum. Karnataka also has something similar, where technology is being used by people to be in touch with each other, and that is one way to really overcome it. Another way is, which is being tried, which is happening in Varanasi, in UP, is teachers coming together on their own to help each other out, visiting each other's schools, trying things out. So perhaps the strength is much more in terms of having a community. And lastly, I think the kind of thing we saw in the framework presented today, it provides a very good framework for a journey by yourself. So self-learning is a very useful way there.
Yep, I would. Is that working? Yeah. So I'd add to that, trying to create communities of practice within certain areas. So I know that in the UK, there's been a lot of success with putting schools together. So it's not just necessarily about the individual teachers networking, but also about clusters of schools. And I know that schools who have been, in fact, I think some research you've done in the UK and the Education Development Trust have found that if you have high-performing schools working as mentor schools for some of the low-performing schools, that's also a good way of providing localised support. If you want to add anything?
Yes, I think, I mean, to be honest, even at a much smaller scale, the most remote schools in the UK, hours away from others, and they find it very difficult. And the problem is, ideally, you would want high-quality broadband in those schools, and of course, they're the least likely to have it. But I think exactly that, it's actually creating a relationship. You have to, at some point, have, even however remote they are, they have to have a relationship with someone, even if that person is far away, who they have to have met. And then they can remotely have a conversation. It's very difficult to be trained through a difficult process, I think, when you need someone you trust, and it's very hard to trust someone just from SMS or from a WhatsApp group. So we have to find ways to get them to meet at least once and build a relationship, and then I think remote technology can help. But it's always going to be more difficult, and we do need to make collaboration possible, whether it is collaborating over lesson plans, whether it's sharing ideas. But what we mustn't do is, because those schools are distant, say, well, all you get to do is share tips with each other. Because lots of tips for teachers, we get too many tips. We need depth, we need thinking. So it is a very tough one, and that's, again, internationally, it's a real problem that the schools who have the best connection are the ones almost who need it the least, because they could just walk down the road.
Thank you. I'm Mukti Sanyal. I teach in a college in Delhi. And, you spoke about celebration. It's very important to celebrate good practices. And I just thought I would like to share that in Delhi, generally, I mean, a lot of teachers who were into, who had been trained into English language teaching, within the country or wherever, or many of them got scholarships to go to the UK, and they came back. Sort of, informally, we have had over 4 decades, we kind of formed that kind of a community. So though, Delhi University English department is yet a very strong literature department, teachers across colleges have come together to strengthen the language teaching component. And that really hasn't happened formally. Like, it's not that, we were empowered to do. But what did happen is that because we were a large community and we kind of reached out, above us, below us, the sides, whatever, we were able to make a difference. So I have a feeling that that kind of initiative, I think often if you are in your path of professional development, you need to find a few partners. And sort of the journey begins there and it goes wherever it has to go.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
I just thought I wanted. Thanks.
Absolutely. And just on that then, you're a bit of a rebel because you're reaching around the system. And I think a really fascinating example, a group of teachers who were classroom teachers, through the power of social media in the UK, they simply said, we're all interested in research. Let's organise a conference. And they organised something a few years ago called Research Ed, and they got together, and then that was brilliant, and academics and leading teachers came along and gave their time for free. It's now running, I think, in 8 different countries across the world. Teachers are coming together. You need one of these as well. But like these informal, you know what, let's forget all the other boundaries. We're just going to volunteer. We're going to come together. We're going to share this knowledge because we love it. And I think, absolutely, you need a bit of rebellion sometimes to get round the system.
Good evening, sir. My name is Ajay Kaushal, and I am from Kevalya Education Foundation. So my question is, what is the definition of a successful teacher? How do you how do you define? It's very difficult because in terms of the performance he gives, in terms of better marks he gives, or whether he produces good children, well-developed personalities of the children, I am not able to find an answer. In case you can give it to me.
Yeah, I'll talk about this for just a second. This, of course, needs about 25 days, but I mentioned adepts to you. This was precisely a discussion which took place over 2 years with all the states of India participating on what do we mean by good teaching and a good teacher. And it is based on this that those performance standards were established and what are the minimum enabling and supportive conditions which create that teacher. So I would really request you just look at it. It's not a very huge document, it's 50-60 pages, but I can't just mention it in 2 minutes. So please look at it. The answer is there.
That was easy.
That's it. Look it up.
Any more questions?
Okay, anyone
Lady
else?
in front.
Yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Durga and I'm from INME Learning. How do you create whole school professional development so that the leadership, the teachers, the students, they're all aligned to the goal, the vision, and what the school wants to achieve as a whole? So how do you create that alignment, and which would perhaps combat the hierarchy power issues that you spoke about? Thank you.
There was another question here that I think is related to your point, which is around the role of assessment and student data and assessment for learning. And I think going back to David's point about starting with the challenges that students are facing and helping teachers notice that through building their awareness of students' progress and helping them think about ways of assessing students' progress informally in the classroom, and enabling them to then get the support they need to help address those particular areas through their professional development. And that then brings in the school leader and the role of the school development plan or the CPD plan. So I think you can get that alignment, but it's hugely challenging because you have to spend a huge amount of time thinking and reflecting and pulling out the important parts of the jigsaw and putting them back together again to try and make a coherent way forward. I don't know if you want to...
Well, yes, so, I mean, this is trying to do this with a lot of schools and helping them do that. And I think exactly, there must be dialogue. There must be great dialogue by a leadership who are listening. They have have to get everybody together saying, what curriculum do we want? What outcomes do we want for our children? Let's constantly talk about what does great learning look like in this subject for this school more widely than curriculum. And then let's get a common understanding of where we are now. So where do we want to get to? Where are we now through great assessment? How far have we achieved those objectives? And then really the professional development itself is what do we want to develop as a whole school? What does each subject need to develop and each speciality? And then finally, every individual. And almost you need all of those bits. Where are we going? Where are we now? The whole school, the bits of the school, and the individuals. And you put all that together, and it's easy. There you've got perfect CPD.
What we found is that exactly this, that unless the group sits together and envisions what kind of school it wants down the line, it won't happen. But one of the stickiest problems is that very often there are varying assumptions and beliefs among people. So when I say a child, I mean something different from what somebody else means. And unless we sort of sort out those beliefs and assumptions, we will keep arguing, for a long time without actually moving forward. So sorting out the beliefs and assumptions right from the very beginning would make a huge difference. For example, in India's case, is a teacher a villain or a victim? You have to sort this out, otherwise you can't go very far.
Absolutely. Just to pick up on a comment that's come in, which is good. We like a bit of challenge. So in a mixed class, focusing more on students who are below average will be an injustice to high achievers. And what's your opinion? And this is an international question. Differentiation, how do we help everyone in our class? For me, I think it's very interesting because, firstly, if you think of all the needs of the least able children, they will also manifest in the more able children, perhaps more subtly, and they'll be able to cover it up. So by thinking of all the different needs, that's very helpful. The second thing is we can think of these mastery approaches, which says that everyone in the class will master a topic, and we will stay on a topic until everyone has reached a certain level, but those who can progress further are given deeper and richer problems in the same task. Now, you see this particularly in the teaching of mathematics, for example. I think you see great approaches in Singapore, in China. I think they're developing some really interesting approaches. There's a slight obsession by the UK government at the moment that everyone now mastery is everything and differentiation is out. It's mastery now. But I do think that we can have both. The worst thing, I think, is if we focus on the children who are the least vulnerable and actually the most able to cope, then we do more injustice than by focusing on the ones who are the least able, but always remembering to keep stretching as well. So I would focus my attention here while stretching here, rather than only focusing on here and just let them fall to one side. But it's never going to be perfect, because every child is different.
There have been a lot of innovative programs within India where all the children are not doing the same thing at the same time in the class. The largest of them is ABL, which ran successfully for some time in 34,000 schools, where you do find different children doing different things according to whatever level they are at. It's not impossible to create a differential classroom. There are challenges. It's not certainly very smooth or very easy. But I think the idea that all children must learn through the same method, same material in the same time, and that's a dead idea. Even if there are not that many variations in the class, even then it's not worth doing the whole class kind of teaching all the time. There has to be differentiation.
Right, I think we can take one more question. The lady at the back.
Can the teacher be held accountable for the learners' outcomes? No, because there has been a stand taken on this in our policy, so I will mention it. Teachers who produce good results are not necessarily good teachers, because the good results may be due to cheating, may be due to beating, or could be because the children are from better off sections of society. So in reality, a teacher may perform very highly, but there have to be other conditions. There has to be support at home, there have to be other academic support to the teachers, so on. So effectiveness, which means the teacher's work produces results, is not the same as teacher performance. Effectiveness is a function of the system, which is one reason why I'm so glad your framework is about the system. It's not just about the teacher. And holding the teacher accountable for student learning is insufficient and not correct.
And we did have a question up there as well.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Shreya. I'm from NUPA, worked with the National Center for School Leadership for some time now, doing research. So my question is actually on the last bit that David you just pointed out about, for a teacher to learn better, she must feel that in order for students to grow, I need to grow. Do you think this has an insight? I mean, and I'm talking at a system level because you need a systemic intervention, especially at the scale at which we are working. Do you think there's an insight on the teacher recruitment processes? And this especially given that we are struggling with a certain policy expecting progressive teachers, but we have things like TET going on and we all know the quality of TETs. So do you happen to have an insight on how to get this done?
There's no magic bullet, certainly, and I think one of the things is the way you present teaching. And actually, we know different types of teachers will come in for different reasons. We know teachers at the elementary or primary level will go in much more because they're interested in children's general growth and nurture, whereas actually at the secondary and higher level, they'll be much more interested in their subject and their love for that. And I think we need to acknowledge that when we talk about teachers, and actually acknowledge different people are coming in for different things. But ultimately, through the training process, we've got to say everything we do, what's your impact on the child? How will the child learn this subject? How will they grow? And our language and everything we do needs to constantly be related to that. And that's actually, in terms of any teacher preparation, we need to constantly not just say, here's the theory, but let's go and have a look, what's the impact on the children, and this mix of in the classroom, what's happening to the children and the theory. But constantly the eye is on the children. What are they learning? How can I help them more? And I think the more we can do that, the better. That's not easy, I realise. That's very easy to say, but much harder to do.
And it's often said that if a teacher loves her children, then any method she uses will work. And because we can't get teachers to love their children, we do CPD. And I sympathize with the question you're raising, because that is a very big issue. You know, we have a whole lot of people who may perhaps not be willing to be in the position in which they are. How do we get around to recruitment? One insight is that there are certain subjects and certain levels for which recruits are becoming even less. For example, nobody wants to teach science or maths. So what we really need is perhaps not so much change in recruitment, but a social marketing process. You know, in countries where teachers perform differently, it is because society has valued teachers differently. It's not because recruitment processes alone have been different. So how do we as a society communicate to teachers that your work really matters, that you have worth? And in fact now teachers are quite highly paid in several states. Teachers earning 60,000-70,000 rupees is not a small amount for us. So really speaking, there's this whole social dimension which has to be seriously looked at, and then the recruitment process will back it up.
I would just add to that, if we all get it right, and the UK is experiencing exactly the same issue, recruitment issues, particularly around science and maths, because of course these people, they can see very lucrative careers elsewhere. But ultimately, look, if we do this right, we can be like Finland, where everybody would rather marry a teacher than a doctor. And if we get to that situation, everyone wants to be a teacher. So we need to raise keep raising the status of teachers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Subir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to now invite Amy Lightfoot for the closing remarks.
Oh, we keep sitting there.
Thank you, Risha. Thank you so much for that really stimulating, interesting discussion. I hope you found that as interesting as I did. And thank you also for all your participation. We had loads of tweets coming in and SMSs. It was great to be able to share them in real time with the speakers on stage. So I don't want to take too much of your time, but I just wanted to reflect on what I've heard from the event this evening. The first thing is, the UK and India may be so different in many ways. David told me this afternoon that it's 9 degrees in London at the moment, which is very hard to imagine. But there are also so many similarities, particularly around teacher education, development, recruitment, as David said. I also thought that it's very important, as the speakers were saying, to consider the teachers at the heart of everything that we're doing with teacher education and development. It reminded me actually of the phrase that it takes a village to raise a child, and that you need to think about the overall system as well and how the teachers fit into that. I also thought
the point about thinking about learners, it's not just about the teachers, it's about who the teachers are there for, ultimately. So it's important to consider people at all levels of the system together. And finally, I just wanted to reiterate the point that was made slightly earlier on about celebrating what teachers are already doing. There is so much good work that is happening all across India, all across the world, all across the UK. And I think sometimes we spend a lot of time debating and worrying about all the problems. And sometimes we need to stop and really try to find and celebrate the really excellent things that are happening already. So finally, I'd just like to say another thank you to all our speakers, to Alison, to Subir and to David. I'd also like to thank our team here at the British Council for all the work they've put in organising the event. And again, a final thank you to you for coming tonight and for your participation. And before I let you go, I just would like you to ask you to think about how you can continue this conversation and make sure that the things that we've talked about tonight turn into action and are not just things that stay in this room. One of the things that you can do, you'll see a flyer that's in the pack that you will get when you leave the theatre, which is the one that we unveiled earlier. We're going to have an online conference at the British Council which looks at the professional practices from the 2 CPD frameworks that Alison mentioned. There's more information about that, so please do take a look and share that with your contacts and networks as well. And finally, I'd just like to ask you, if you were given a feedback form before you came in, if you could please complete that before you go. That's it from us. Thank you so much for coming. Please join us outside for drinks in the Charbagh.